Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another webinar of Seamless Retail and E-commerce. Thank you for joining us today. We will be kicking off with the topic, how to define and accelerate your new strategy for home delivery during COVID-19. This session will be moderated by Shailen Shukla, the supply chain and logistics expert. Our panelists for the session who will be sharing their knowledge with us are Stanton, Chief Business Officer at Emirates Post, Mohamed Assaf, Vice President, Corporate Development and Transformation Office of Retail Majid Al Futtaim, Simon Russell, former Director of Operations Development of John Lewis UK, and Kunal Gupta, Director of Supply Chain of Bateel. Now, could I please ask all the speakers to turn on the webcam and microphone? And while they do that, I'd like to remind our webinar attendees that you can ask questions throughout the panel session using the question feature, and we will try to get round to all of your questions. Okay, so without further ado, Shailen, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to all the panelists and all the listeners. Yeah, as we are seeing, there's a huge surge in the business volume for home deliveries because of the lockdown. And while the global industry before the lockdown, the overall, the global retail volume was almost 27 trillions. Yeah, out of which almost 18% was supposed to be, online business through various omni-channel or, pure e-commerce model. But that volume just went through the roof because people were stuck at home. They wanted groceries, they wanted laptops to work from home. The kids' education had moved to online. Everything, all the education was being imparted online. So everybody wanted tablets. So probably almost all of us have seen rise in e-commerce volumes to the tune of almost 8 to 10 times, if not more. And suddenly people realize that, how important grocery retail has been, and the online delivery, which used to take 40 minutes, suddenly, it started taking 2 days, 3 days. So it complicated the skyline a lot, and people had to rise to the occasion, and they did rise to the occasion. So we'll one by one take opinion from all the participants, and I would like to begin with Simon Russell. Simon, you are in a very dangerous territory, So tell us, how is UK Europe coping with the boom of home deliveries in this era of shutdown?
Sure. Well, I think similar to the UAE, all of the non-food retailers have had to close their shops since March. There's been a huge surge online, and I think we've seen a real mix of results how businesses have coped with that. I think the benefit of the UK and Europe is that online is a little bit more mature than some other parts of the world. But having said that, some UK non-food retailers, their website has not coped with the volume. Some particularly retailers that don't have automated warehouse, so it's highly manual, have really kind of struggled with the spike in demand because of social distancing there. Some of the carriers have not been able to kind of flex up, and a lot of the stock was that had been bought for certainly the spring summer season here was left in the shops, and some retailers transferred to their DCs, their distribution centers. Others had it stranded in their shops, which didn't help. The business, John Lewis, I can talk with some kind of confidence there. It's lucky in a way that already 40% of its business is online. And the spike in online, it probably trebled, so it's not quite as, that the uplift is not quite as great because a lot of it is online already. But it basically brought our seasonal peak for Christmas here, Black Friday. It's brought that right forward to the end of March and April with no planning. But two things we were fortunate in the business, that we all of the staff and shops, as many of those that were either close to a warehouse, were sent there to help, and those close to one of our contact centers were sent there to help. So that allowed us get instantly a load of resource who understood the business, the brand, the assortment, the systems to be able to help. And that business actually managed to carry on with its next day delivery and click and collect. So it's been pretty much business as usual. One of the real benefits, and I think is more popular certainly in the UK, is click and collect. John Lewis is fortunate enough to have a sister business called Waitrose, which is a grocery chain, and that means it's still been open, and we've had the ability to collect items in 350 supermarkets next day for all of our customers. So that has really helped in taking some of the demand off of carriers. So that's been a real kind of help. But a number of websites and businesses have really struggled to cope, and they've had to close down new orders. And I think it's really made them think in terms of the future of what they need to do to plan for this, given the trend is probably going to continue.
Thank you so much, Simon. It's really good to hear that you're doing well. Now moving on to Steve. Steve, you are a very large operator, probably the largest last mile delivery operator in UAE. And suddenly you must already be full with so much of volumes. You're doing banks and you're doing e-commerce and, so how did you cope up? I mean, somebody who may be running 300-400 vehicles already, couriers in the city, how do you cope up when it goes up by 5 times or 10 times, How do you manage that?
Yeah, with a little difficulty actually. I think the key to it all is doing your planning and your contingency planning. I mean, we pretty much experienced peak season volumes ×2 within the space of a week. So usually we have months to plan for peak seasons through the year, and the volumes just immediately started to flow. The COVID situation is pretty much unprecedented in its nature and the impacts. Now, we're heavily into e-commerce, as we are other vertical industries such as banking and government sector, etc. But the e-commerce volumes took off immediately, obviously because of the home shopping and the changing in customer purchasing behaviours. I think one thing that struck us was the creativity of the market. I mean, a lot of impacts were felt elsewhere, and those industries and those businesses immediately grasped the impact and the potential impact going forward, which was then advantageous to us. So, for example, taxis. We were one of the first in the market to start utilising the taxi industry because the resources were available, and obviously the driving hours were vastly reduced. Anything from food delivery companies to newspaper delivery companies, anyone who had a vehicle which was impacted quite quickly reacted, which helped the cause. But when we discussed later in terms of finding the best last mile partner, not all of them are suitable. What I would say, I think there's some key indicators for this type of impact that helped us. Number one was capacity planning. We have multiple capacity planning models, so we have a business as usual, and we also have a best case scenario should things happen. As it happens, we could never have planned for this type of volume growth within a week's time. It was even our best case model was under what we actually experienced. But I think it's important to build up your resource plan. I mean, we have an internal, we have 1,000 people in the courier operation around the UAE, and we know their efficiencies. It's really important to understand the efficiencies that you have at the moment, and also we were able to build in a level of variability whereby we can increase capacity internally and then have an incremental cost impact. So things like additional working hours during the week, working Fridays, and allowing the resource to be expanded and only incurring the cost at the time the resource is actually is actualized. So we were able to cope with it, some of which internally, But from an external perspective, we already had a range of partners that we work with. Importantly, those partners were integrated with us, and we do that as a natural course. Even if volumes are low with a partner off peak, then we'll be integrated with them, so we get the seamless data flow. And the data allows us to do the planning, allows us to understand the performance, and gives us the opportunity to mix and match where resource is required across the country. The working hours I mentioned, but I think the creativity element in this in this period has been a great help. You know, I mentioned the Dubai taxi option. We're working with other taxi providers as well, only when we can confirm both the efficiency of a driver and the quality of a driver. I think it's important the way that we view the outsourced partner model is to work with people that reflect our level of quality. You know, at the end of the day, the courier is the extension, is the customer experience component and the extension of our customers. So we've got to make sure that they are fully on board with a very, very defined SLA, clear set of instructions as to how a person or a driver completes that last mile component of the delivery, and also knows what to do in the event of something strange. I mean, if you look back over the last 5 weeks, the receiver behaviour patterns have completely changed. People worried to come to the door to be able to receive their parcel. So we very quickly put in a contactless delivery process to minimise the risk. And you know, putting a contact delivery process together is straightforward, but you need the tech, and you need to be able to train people to do it correctly and do that very, very quickly, which we did. I think one of the benefits we had, and I know some don't have this option, but we have a large real estate bank across the UAE. We operate 103 post offices, so the courier operation that we have, throughout 2019, we transformed it into a hyperlocal model. And that hyperlocal model is basically moving to, instead of a large set of high volume locations and sort and processing facilities, moving to a distributed model. And the distributed model, we now have 27 locations around the UAE where we have couriers operating within maximum of a 5-kilometre radius. So we distributed the volume. Thankfully, it helped us from a risk profile as well, because we distributed the risk should we have a COVID impact amongst the team. And it provided a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to ramp up and ramp down, because the industry from a courier perspective in the UAE is quite fragmented. There's over 130 courier operations that are licensed by the Emirates Post Group operating in the UAE, some of them very small, some of them very large. So the distribution of that skill set is quite broad across the country, but it's quite difficult to pin down and identify who are the ideal partners to suit each individual business. So I think I'd like to close the capacity discussion. A lot of it is about relationships. It's about knowing the players, understanding who's there, and just engage. Talk to people, because you never know when something like this could pop up. If you have the contacts and you know the capabilities of certain players, just go and visit them, have a look at their operations, gain a level of comfort, and then you have the ability to ramp up in the background if we see something like this in the future, which hopefully we won't.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think it's really heartening that you've been using options like taxis, which is like a win-win for those people who are sitting without work, and as well as for people like you who needed more capacity. So it was a win-win for both of you, and it's really good that you could collaborate. And I can personally vouch for your services as a user of Emirates Post Group, that yes, while others were delivering in 7 days and 15 days, you were still delivering in second day, third day. So that's quite heartening. And your reach is so extensive. I must appreciate that, the remote areas, the rural areas are very well covered. So probably, it would have helped you to, ramp up much easier. because of this these various collaborations. Yeah. So now coming back to Mohammed, my question to you would be, how stay at home is the new norm. So how has it impacted your business and the delivery operations? What have you done to meet with this new challenge in the revised scenario?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. This is a very good question, Shailen. So just to shed quickly some light on the organization I work for, Majd Al-Futtaim and Majd Al-Futtaim Retail. So we have more than 300 stores split between hypermarkets, supermarkets, and convenience across 16 different countries, actually, right from Georgia all the way to Kenya, passing through the Middle East, of course. So you could imagine, Shailen, actually the impact, the varying actually degree of the impact in each of these markets. I mean, in some markets, for example, we were asked to shut down stores for a period of time, while in some other markets we had less severe actions actually or imposement from the government. So you could imagine the impact resulted out of that. Now, to answer this question in specific, in general, we have actually seen an increase in single transaction value, which we call in our language the average basket, and a decrease in the transaction frequency. All right, so you see actually shoppers, customers do less shopping in terms of frequency, but they buy very high average basket due, of course, to the restrictions of the commute and the shopping transactions. This, of course, resulted into a very change as well in the consumption behavior. So you see customers focusing a lot now on the essentials, food staples, and tightening a little bit the lid on the non-essential products. So you see most of the customers buying, of course, grocery, buying hygiene products. So, for example, I can tell you, we have witnessed 600% actually increase in all purchases related to health and well-being, like, for example, gym equipment. All right, we did not witness that before. When it comes to purchases related to hygiene, like soap, sanitizers, I mean, I can tell you we are seeing close to 1,000% actually increase in purchasing such products. So all of these changes in the consumption behavior impacted actually heavily the business that we operate in. Now this is one side of it. The other side of it, I can tell you actually proudly, we tailored quickly and promptly the operating model actually inside our stores in order to cater for this remarkable, unprecedented behavior when it comes to shopping. So you could see actually in some stores, if you do, I hope you do shopping in one of our Carrefour stores in UAE, for example, you will see the aisles of the grocery are actually increased at the expense of the aisles of, for example, the textile, because it's not to be hidden. People now, customers, shoppers, are buying food much more than clothes or textiles. So we immediately changed actually we call it in our language the planogram, the way we display products in the selling area, and we increased the spaces for food at the expense of the non-food. So this is one example I can tell you of the impact actually that we have witnessed out of the COVID-19, of course, situation, and we can maybe shed some light on the reactions that we have taken in details while we go through this.
Home delivery, what did you do to manage the home delivery? The additional load.
Sure. So with home delivery, actually, we have done so many different measures. So I can tell you one of them, for example, is redeployment of resources. So Majd Al-Futtaim Retail Carrefour is part of a bigger ecosystem called Majd Al-Futtaim. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19, all of our leisure and entertainment businesses actually were shut. So Vox Cinemas, for example, are not actually operating and has not been operating for the last couple of months. So we have reskilled our human resources employees from Vox Cinema, more than 1,000 actually members and colleagues. And now they are doing online fulfillment. They are doing picking and packing for our online orders. So that's one example of us adapting to the home delivery, redeployment of resources within the ecosystem of Majid Al Futtaim in general. And we have redeployed as well resources within the same store. So we have taken lots of salesmen, for example, or stockers, colleagues working in the non-food department into the food department, doing also picking and packing. So this is another example of what we've done in order to adapt to the increase actually of the online orders. As well as we have recently, probably you read the news, partnered with the government actually in both Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and we are utilizing the Dubai taxi through the government, of course. We have signed a partnership with Aramex and through the Dubai Economic of Department in order to utilize the taxis to extend our last mile reach as well as the fulfillment capacity. We have done as well a similar partnership in Abu Dhabi with a company called Tawasul, also through the government. On top of this as well, we have reutilized many of our spaces inside the stores to become dark stores. So you will see, for example, some of our stores in Dubai are shrunk now, and a big portion of that, or a certain portion of that, it transformed into a dark store, what we call a dark store. The dark store actually is nothing but a store dedicated only for online deliveries, right? So these are a set of examples we have done in order actually to cater and adapt for the increase of the online delivery in countries like UAE.
Thank you so much. And really heartening to again hear that you redeployed your people, and instead of letting them remain idle, and they were still earning and they were working and doing fulfillment, which is a very good thing. Again, a win-win for both of you. They get redeployed, they get utilized properly, and you get extra capacity for fulfillment, which is a very, very good move, I must say. So now moving on to Kunal, Kunal, how do you manage? And, like to hear from you, how can retailers and SMEs quickly and efficiently meet the demands of e-commerce, because I'm not sure how big is e-commerce for you, but how did you manage with the spikes, and what is your advice for others?
Sure. Thanks, Shailen. You're asking me the most difficult question, yeah? How to quickly meet the demand of e-commerce? Probably, see, it pretty much again varies on industry to industry, but I'll talk more about food industry, and I think Mohamed has clearly given us a preview on how the grocery and food industry has coped up with the increased surge. So before I begin, just to quickly tell you about Bateel. So a lot of people know Bateel just for their luxury dates and retailing, but we are equally big on cafes, which is unfortunately not seen a spike, which has suffered a great blow in terms of footfall. And we have a fair presence online. So outside UAE and across pretty much outside GCC, we are extremely popular when it comes to our e-commerce, basically online shopping. So that has seen obviously a big growth. Now, coming back to the question of, how people can look at meeting this e-commerce demand. See, I think, again, I'll take some food industry example. Now, I think it's not a quick solution or an easy solution that immediately you can ramp up your capacity and do things, which obviously a lot of us have done. So I would like to call it like we are all operating in this crisis mode. So this whole short-term strategy for everybody would be to do a more like a crisis mode management, where you have a critical task force. It's a short-term thing, because you cannot run things the way you are, because you are cross-utilizing your resources. Like you mentioned, you're cross-training them. Obviously, in these short-term crisis mode resource management, you can also look at a little bit of seeing how you check and do your assortment, realign your assortment. Like I think Mohammed mentioned, reutilizing his store space. Now people can reutilize their whole product portfolio. I mean, Simon mentioned about seasonality, right? So obviously spring collection might not work and people go back to their regular round the year kind of a thing. So people need to relook at how their SKUs and how their product line is, and probably which ones they need to promote now rather than coming it completely either out of season or making it completely obsolete. In terms of food, it expires, so all the more dangerous from that perspective. We can try and utilize a little bit of markdown strategy to promote things, or even look at charities and promotion at this point of time, because it's a difficult phase for the world. So coming from the food industry, we'd like to probably have this food eaten by somebody rather than throwing it in the bin, because ultimately it is going to get expired. So these kind of things, of course, retraining the staff, because we had a big footprint on cafe and retail, we also redeployed resources to meet the demand of e-commerce. That could be done. Also, I think there are a couple of things on a longer term. I would like to say that apart from the crisis mode management, which is your more of a short-term strategy, we should look at more of a medium or a long term, which I would say is more like 3 to 6 months from now, till probably a vaccine is out and we all see a post-COVID era per se. I think it's really important to look at what is that short term, or rather a medium or a long term strategy, where it's more of a management view, that they have to look for uh, focusing more on platforms, more going. I mean, I would strongly feel a term which is from B2B to E2E. Now there is a new thing called exchange to exchange. I mean, as we go along, it's going to be more and more important how we interact with our customers, how we get their data, how we understand. Eventually we can service them online, because e-commerce is here to stay. I mean, it's not that just because now e-commerce is there, consumer behavior is going to change now, and a part of it or most of it is actually going to stay back. You don't know what percentage. I don't think anybody can give a real percentage to it right now, but I'm sure a fairly big amount of percentage will stick to it. I mean, sitting at your home ordering grocery on your computer is much easier for a lot of people, and they will find comfort out of that rather than going back to the stores and picking product aisle by aisle. So it is going to be a new reality, and we'll not see everybody coming back to the stores, so footfall will come down. So there has to be a medium or a long-term strategy on how people can scale up their operations in terms of e-commerce. So that's one part. And then I also noticed a very immediate quick solution, like you were saying. So because in food industry there are also distributors and food distributors who don't do B2C business, but they are B2B. So they are only supplying to hotel industries and restaurants and people like us who have food manufacturing. Now imagine, I mean, this is one of the example I really like. I think within a week we got into this whole lockdown. Practically, I mean, probably all about 5 or 7 of our top big vendors who were giving all food supplies to us, everybody started their own WhatsApp group and started marketing on WhatsApp a PDF file saying, this is the food items you can order from us, and we'll deliver it to your house. So my point is, this is also e-commerce. Yeah, e-commerce does not have to mean necessarily that you have a fancy website. The idea is a consumer is able to connect to you, give an order to you, and you are delivering to the house. So this is, for me, this was very quick thinking on the feet. Maybe these guys would have in their long-term plan had a plan of opening a website next year, having a B2C deliveries later, but how they quickly thought on their feet. Everybody started circulating messages to their customers, to their clients, and what we call is this, the new guerrilla marketing, the WhatsApp group marketing, where people, and they are actually doing well, because all this food is sitting in their warehouses, which is worth millions of dirhams and dollars, and ultimately within a certain time, if you don't consume it, it will all go waste. So I think there are more than one ways and means, and of course depends very much on the industry, but these are a couple of things that happen. And for us personally, like within Bateel, I mean, it's not even 3-digit, I would say it was like a 4-digit growth that we saw on the e-commerce surge, because not only because it was e-commerce, but because we are in this holy month of Ramadan, where dates are a popular product. So not only because of the situation we are in, generally this is our busiest time. I mean, so we kind of had expected a peak, but not on the e-commerce front, but on the retail and the, you know, actually on the retail front. So all that diverted completely to e-commerce. Obviously, then we had to deploy resources from our retail channels, from our production, even from our cafe. Everybody was back in the production of dates. They were packing dates, and we were trying to kind of, you know, so all hands on the deck were pretty much how we were about managing the search. So that is somehow what we did. But like I said, this is pretty much everybody has to look and do a short-term crisis management and a long-term strategic plan on how they should focus on e-commerce going forward, really.
Thank you so much, Kunal. I really like this idea of guerrilla marketing through, WhatsApp groups. And, in India, we typically call this a jugaad, so a new way of doing things with minimal resources and minimal cost. So thank you so much, Kunal. Meanwhile, there is one question from the audience. I would like to take that question. The question is that will warehouse automation become an accelerated focus for retailers and e-commerce companies now that we could be social distancing for the foreseeable future? So I would just give a preliminary answer, and then maybe I can request Simon or anyone else to jump in and add to whatever I'm saying. The biggest problem with us is that automation decisions are taken by the CEOs, CFOs, and not the operation guys. So they are always asking for an ROI, which is not always there. And Simon can probably vouch for it. All those warehouses which had already automation in place probably would have fared 50% or 100% better than those guys who do not have automation. Yeah. So much for the CFOs asking for an ROI all the time. So many times, there is not an ROI. You cannot establish an ROI for everything. You may not have enough people right now in the UK to work for fulfillment in the warehouse. So all those people who did the automation are very happy. And all those people whose automation got shot down by the CEOs and the CFOs are probably cribbing. And those guys at the top need to realize that they need to give the power of automation to the people who are in operations, who are on the ground. They know this business better than you, and everything cannot have an ROI. So that was my comment, and probably there'll be a renewed focus on automation now that we've seen this unprecedented situation. So Simon, if you have to add or anything, anyone else wants to add anything?
Yeah, I'd like to add something, Shailen, if you allow me. So this is again, Mohamed. So luckily our CEOs and CFOs in Majd Al Futtaim Retail are more optimistic, all right, and they come from a different school. So so they have as a strategy actually in Majd Al Futtaim Carrefour, we truly believe in the great opportunity actually that the digital world will bring to the retail business, because we truly believe in that. Hence, we even actually have come up with a slogan that our strategy is to become prominent digitally as we are physically. Therefore, probably you read recently the announcement of a tie-up we have signed with a company called Takeoff, in which we will be having lots of micro fulfillment centers attached to many of our hypermarkets in the region, actually starting from UAE and Saudi Arabia. This will allow us to fulfill thousands of orders on daily basis from hypermarkets and supermarkets in an automatic way. So this micro fulfillment center actually is a mini automated warehouse dedicated only to the online businesses. I might agree with you on the ROI challenge in that, but if you think future, Shailen, I am undoubtful actually about the great ROI it will bring financially and non-financially as well. Because if measuring the ROI shouldn't be focused only on financial measures actually and matrices as well.
Exactly, customer happiness could also be an ROI.
Absolutely. Let's not forget the very, very important impact such initiatives will bring to the customer satisfaction. and even to the economy actually. All right, so I totally agree with you. Financial ROIs are important, but it shouldn't be the only lens we see through all the future projects and initiatives.
Exactly.
Then sorry, I actually have a different view, if I may. See, I'm not against automation by any standard or digitalization. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of that. But I mean, my perspective in today's scenario, honestly, is, and I think a lot of us have already noticed. I mean, I'll take my own example. Bateel, when I say we saw 4-digit growth spike in terms of e-commerce. Now, my thinking, when you do automation systems or any system for that matter, there is a certain assumption in terms of capacity. Yeah. So you will always make your system or automation based on, yeah, today is my capacity X, but let's design it for 2X or 3X. No system or automation in the world will be designed to do 20 times, 40 times, or 100 times the volume or the surge that we have taken. So my point, honestly, is right now is I personally think it's the human being that we worked with, it's the team that we had, with which we could, and all of us are witness to that we were able to manage this kind of an unprecedented spike in certain sectors. I mean, this is also a time where you need to support those guys who have been with you, or they also need some work to do. So like I said, I'm not against automation, but my personal view is no amount of automation can actually replace when you have crisis like this, and this is a crisis situation. It's not a regular spike, seasonality spike, like Simon said that we all have time to plan Christmas and Black Fridays, but this is not a Black Friday or a Black Tuesday. It is a time where you would not see any other assumed planned things coming out. So I think sometimes we'll have to really go back to our basics and figure out some certain things only human beings, and like like even Steve mentioned creativity. Creativity comes out in play. So that time you cannot tweak the machine to do a more output by doing creative, but it's only the human being who can get you the result, really.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kunal. But in any case, we have so many spikes during the year. You have the DSF spike, you have the back to
I
school
agree.
spike, then you have
So general,
back
the
from
ones you
school,
can plan for, you can
then
have
you
those
have the
automation, but I
yeah,
think
then
in
you
these
have the
kind of
Eid
scenarios,
spike,
probably it not work. Yeah,
then you have the second
absolutely.
Eid spike. So I think it is good to have
Correct.
automation. Then
No,
you'll
no,
have
I
the
like I said, I'm not
night time.
disagreeing. Yeah, but I
Uh,
think on our
then
scenario
you have the
today,
night time
probably it wouldn't
spike.
have worked.
Yeah. Simon, would you like to add anything?
Yes, from my experience, I think I would agree with a number of the comments that it really is a strategic play. So it's your board, I think, deciding what part of online will play in your business in the future. And if you see in 3 or 5 years' time it is going to be dramatically different, then it's an important play. My business made that decision probably about 10 years ago, and actually in terms of ROI, it raised a number of eyebrows. Strategically, that was quite important, and we added more and more automated warehouses. So we have 3 altogether now. The only comment I would make is that whilst that the lion's share of your e-commerce business can be managed with your automated warehouses, in an omni-channel world, you can't purely survive in them. So a really good order manager system, and increasingly looking at your stock holding in your shops and actually how you can kind of blend the two together, that will give you the lowest cost to serve for each product, but also maximize availability. I say our online business is about $2.6 billion, but often the warehouses are out of stock and you have to rely on stock in your shops. So it's the whole thing kind of working together. But I think they're key strategic plays to have more automated warehouses in the future would be my view.
Thank you, Simon. I fully agree with you. And continuing with you, would you like to throw some light as to what were the pain points of the retailers, online retailers during this time in home deliveries? And what did the successful ones do? What did they do differently from others to succeed? Simon. Simon, you are muted.
Yeah, sorry, just repeat the question. You cut out a little bit for me.
Yeah, my question was that what were the pain points of the retailers, online retailers during this time, and the ones who were successful, who did well, what did they do differently from others to come out successful in your region?
Sure. So the first thing was the capacity of the website. So how many customers can it actually cope with at any one time? And a number of fairly established retailers in the UK actually had virtual queuing just to get onto the website. So the more successful ones had invested in future capacity and could cope with the spikes in volume. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I mentioned contact centers earlier on. When all of your sales are going online, or a lot more are going online, depending on the products that you sell, it can trigger a number of questions that are all diverted to your contact centers that previously some of your expert staff in your shop would be able to answer. So questions around products. So technology in the contact centers using asynchronized messaging, so message or WhatsApp to be able to answer queries is a more efficient way than just using voice calls, and how you can ramp up your resource there. So I mentioned earlier on, successful ones were having staff that were able to be flexible and move between your shops and contact centers. That really kind of helped. And again, thirdly, probably around delivery, really, those who had really invested in their communications tools or their order manager again, that were proactively managing customers to tell them, reassure them that their order was being processed, and this is the day it will be delivered, and this is the time window, to save those people have to telephone back. Diversified click and collect was really key in the UK. So I mentioned those retailers that use some of the corner shops or supermarkets to collect. That was a real kind of win for them. Returns is another kind of key area. Returns for online are materially higher. So fashion returns in the UK online, around 49% of orders are returned. So the ability to manage that and process those kind of promptly. And trust, I think, with retailers is really key. Certainly in the groceries here, the supermarkets are really managing social distancing well, limiting the number of people coming to the shop, marking the floor out to have 2-meter distance, and really kind of policing it. I've got huge respect from kind of customers. And again, I think that goes for deliveries, delivery teams. So I've just had a washing machine delivered already this morning, and although they won't bring it into the house and install it, people that will respect social distancing, take it right to the door where you want it, remove all the packaging. That kind of trust has been key. But I think for all retailers, it's been a wake-up call, even in a mature market, because I think COVID-19 has exposed some of the cracks in some businesses about where they need to invest in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And we have only about 15 minutes left. So quickly moving on to the second round of questions, and now going to Steve. Steve, how does a retailer or a user, choose the last mile delivery partner? And what will change, what are the points one should keep in mind to choose a partner, like you? You are on mute. You are on mute. Please unmute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I would advise the initial steps are obviously understanding your own business model, understanding volumes and forecast volumes, and as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to have multiple forecast models that give you different scenarios and different planning. Well, once you have your volume planning tied up and you know where you're expecting to be in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months, if you're able to plan that far ahead, I'd make sure you have a very clear SLA. Now, bear in mind, the more complex the SLA, the more difficult it is to find the right partner. If you're generic in your requirements and your terms and conditions about pickup, about visibility, about tracking, about data integration, about the actual delivery process, then there are some standards in the industry, and then there are some some that are just completely not there in the market now. And the market will learn. If you come up with new ideas and new requirements, then very quickly the UAE's, it's very entrepreneurial. There's a fast follower type mentality where if someone sees something new, they'll copy and paste it and put it into place quite quickly. So it's that in itself is good for the market. Next, I would choose your partner strategy. There's lots and lots of different models out there. So it could be a fully outsourced model, and if your outsourced model, even within the outsourced model, there's different variants. You could hire vehicles and drivers. You could use a pay-per-delivery type model, which gives you obviously the flexibility of having tolerance in your forecast and in your P&L for volume fluctuations in peak and off peak. The risk obviously is if you work with people on a variable shipping model, that unless you plan properly and you have a good indication of where you will be in peak season, the e-commerce industry can be very seasonal, particularly here in its infancy in the UAE. You may find that those partners don't have the capability or decide to go elsewhere and chase the extra dirham from someone else. So there's a little bit of a risk in there. But the market itself has changed somewhat over the past few years. There's a lot of newcomers into the industry, and they don't consider themselves courier companies. They consider themselves tech companies. They are tech rich and asset light. And the model is they have the platform, they have the tech, and then they'll just outsource the vehicles and the drivers from various manpower and vehicle companies around the UAE on a lease basis. So they're asset light. That model itself can be brought in-house by yourself as long as you have the right tech. And the tech is it's basically shipment life cycle visibility. It's the track and trace, and that can be as extensive or limited as you wish it to be. So one of the considerations would be when choosing a partner, make sure that they've got the tech that suits your model. As I said, it could have all bells and whistles and lots of different notifications and customer contacts and feedback and customer surveys, NPS surveys, anything such as that. It's all there, but you just need to choose what's best for your requirement. Obviously, there's also the in-house alternative as well. If your data is clear enough and you can build a business model that allows you to go in-house, then it makes sense. It's the other option to provide, albeit the trend seems to be over the last few years of people moving more to an outsourced model. We're seeing growth from traditional partners that would have their own in-house fleet and drivers, and they're now outsourcing purely because it allows them to focus on their core business model and allows entities such as us who have the experience and the expertise in running last mile operations to help their business. I'd certainly say do your research, make sure you are very clear on who is available in the market. I mentioned it earlier today, there is a very high number, or there was a very high number of courier operators within the UAE and last mile operators of varying standards and size and quality and service commitment. So there's many different options out there. Make sure you understand the people, understand who the management are, meet the management, and go and visit. Obviously, notwithstanding COVID restrictions, go and have a look at the operation, see what facilities they have, because generally you'll be able to tell straight away. If you want a quality service, you'll be able to see a quality operation. It will be clean, it will be tidy, it will be organized, it will be well laid out. A good signage, good branding around the building, and the reflection of how the general operation is operated will absolutely be reflected in the mindset of the most important people in this, which are the couriers. Speak to the couriers, understand what they feel about the organisation in which they work, because the couriers are great at talking. They're very good. They meet customers every single day, and so that more often than not, they will shed light on the ethos behind the organisation. And you can guarantee if there's a good ethos and there's a good working environment within the organisation, then your service levels are going to be protected and looked after. Last couple of things, we found that starting small is always good. do not jump in with one partner fully fledged from day one, because the risk of the big bang type approach is can be very risky and can not work from time to time. So we generally, when we work with people and we work with new partners, we'll start small or raise relatively small, depending on how big they are, and build up. And you build up the trust and you build up the relationship, and it gives you visibility on the capability and how your last mile operations are being handled. I think the last two closing points are, if from an e-commerce perspective, cash on delivery is required. It's still very prevalent within the UAE, the cash on delivery model. It's changing a lot, and I'm really interested to see the impact of cash on delivery as a result of COVID, because some organisations that we work with, their cash on delivery requirements were 60–70% of all transactions. Now that could change, and I expect it will change, but nevertheless, be very, very clear and very, very tight on your processes relating to cash. It's cash flow at the end of the day, it's your money, and you need to make sure that the partner has the right processes and the right technology in place to be able to very easily have visibility and manage that process. And the last thing, directly from a UAE perspective, is make sure they're licensed. There are in the UAE unlicensed operators, we know that, and the corporate team around behind the Emirates Post Group entity, which regulates the courier industry in the UAE, works hard to make sure that the licenses are in place and the standards are set. So, just as a final check, you may find some people out there that are not licensed, and as such, there's an even bigger risk for you in terms of disruption to your service should something happen. So that's in general what I would look at. Our approach from an Emirates Post perspective is it's the early days are so important. It's about being transparent, being very clear on what commitments we can provide, but also being very open with our partners and clients and customers in terms of understanding their data and understanding their SLAs. If you can tick those two off at the very beginning, you are 50% of the way towards a very successful relationship, particularly when you partner with someone who's able to grow with your model. You know, COVID's unprecedented. Outside of that, generally with the people that we work with, we have a 6-month volume plan where possible that gives us time to understand where we would need to ramp up to support the client and the customer. And that's in general the advice I would give. It's not necessarily rocket science, but it certainly takes some care and attention to get it right.
Steve, one question as a user, you know, what would you look at, cost or the quality of service? You know, because mostly, you know, there are so many courier companies, courier or last mile delivery has become like a commodity. You know, people are buying based on price.
Well, without doubt, if it's quality first, cost second. If you find the right partner and you have the right SLA and the right service support, that half a dirham or that 1 dirham could have a massive impact on your business in terms of the experience that your customer receives. You know, it's the last element of the straightforward process, excluding returns of costs. So quality first. Spend time on the SLA. Spend time getting to know them on a pilot basis, and then ramp up. And prices can always be discussed at a later stage and could be volume driven. But you know, I wouldn't scrimp and save. And of course, I would say that as a last mile provider. But you pay for what you get. You really do.
There is a question from audience, Steve. I would like to, you know, pop the question to you. You know, there's a question. What do you guys think of a potential in launching an aggregator of supply chain, irrespective of type of business? I think it's pointing out to aggregator of last mile delivery, because this whole discussion is about last mile. So the Uber of last mile. You know, what do you think about it?
I probably need to put my regulatory hat on there as part of the Emirates Post Group, because the licensing laws don't support the aggregator model here in the UAE at this point in time. Whether that changes or not, I'm not aware, but that whole concept of aggregating from a courier perspective and last mile is not within the law at the moment.
but as an entrepreneur or from a, not forget the regulatory part for a moment. How's the idea? Does it make sense? Does it appeal? Maybe not here, somewhere else.
I think from an industry perspective, we should all be looking at how we drive service excellence and how we drive value. And if the aggregator model provides people with access to a wide range, so long as the quality is maintained and and obviously it'll drive price competitiveness in the market as well, then it could make sense. I think the one issue the market has at the moment is that the pricing over the last couple of years has been driven down so much that it has been to the detriment of quality, and it needs to be rebalanced. And obviously, industry by industry, there's variances. The cost of no disrespect, Mohamed, but a grocery delivery versus the cost of another e-commerce commodity or item which is very, very high value, or luxury items, for example, would vary because there's other measures and controls that should be in place. So it's interesting to see how after COVID the market pricing element will be addressed, because there's a lot of volume there and there's a lot of fight for it.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thanks. Now moving on to Mohamed. Mohamed, how has the behavior of your customers changed, in this situation, and how are you managing it now?
Thank you, Shailen. So the consumption behavior actually has changed again drastically. As I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, we see a drastic increase in stocking up. All right, so customers again are not going to stores a lot, but when they go to stores, they buy a lot. So they have very much high average basket, and we have a great actually tendency from customers to shop now online versus online. So statistically speaking, we have seen actually a remarkable increase, more than 50% of our offline customers are actually buying now using two different channels, using offline and using online, because of course of the restrictions on the commute and on the transportation. Lots of focus as well was placed from them when it comes to hygiene products. So they buy a lot of hygiene products like soaps, detergents, sanitizers, and stuff like that. And a lot of sentiment from a customer standpoint related as well, Shailen, to the health and well-being. So you see now lots of customers actually shifting their consumption behavior towards becoming more healthy in their buying. So they focus a lot about the sustainability aspects of their purchasing behaviors. They look at the ingredients of products as well, and the material actually that the packaging of the products have been used. We see a great and remarkable level of awareness actually increase from the consumers in that specific aspects. I don't expect actually the situation to get back to normal post-COVID. We expect a lot of continuous actually of the shopping behaviors to be post-COVID as well. So you will probably see more customers buying more online, and that's why in our strategy we are providing an omni-channel experience to our customers. So the focus will be on offline and as well as online. And as Simon mentioned, you will actually still see customers going to do shopping offline, but maintaining, for example, social distancing, focusing a lot on the sanitization process, even the live sanitization process of the trolleys and the shopping wagons, which was not actually the case pre-COVID. So this, I expect it will continue. And we see as well an increased encouragement and requests actually from customers to be or to obtain the contactless shopping, right? And that's why we are introducing so many digital innovations actually inside the stores, like for example the scan and go using the handheld devices. So a customer actually enters a store, takes the wagon or the shopping cart, and does the scanning of the products, sorry, does the scanning of the products and even finishing the payment without contacting anybody inside the store. So we introduced Scan and Go by using the handheld devices. We introduced the Scan and Go in a couple of branches using the mobile devices as well. So you can go and do your shopping using your mobile device, of course, through our app, Carrefour app. We've introduced as well a service like Valet Trolley, where a customer could go and do shopping in our hypermarkets and some selected supermarkets as well. Leave the trolley and then go home. We will do the delivery and we will finish even the payment when the delivery is done at the doorstep of the customer. And the recently introduced as well innovation, which we call the click and collect. So you could, as a customer, order your items online and go make collect them or have them ready to be collected actually from the nearest store. So so this is in a nutshell what we see related to the consumption behavior.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. But just stretching the discussion a little forward, in Europe, we've seen that there are a lot of deliveries on tube stations, bus stands, outside your office, because people are, mostly working during the day. Their only receiving time is in the evening. And grocery probably is the biggest ticket item because you buy groceries almost every other day, and mobile phones you may buy only once in a year. So are you seeing any growth in terms of how you will revolutionize the delivery in terms of, grocery? And a lot of grocery deliveries have been delayed because of lower capacities. How will the, e-commerce grocery people deal with it?
True, absolutely. So it's not to be actually hidden that most of the retailers worldwide, they have actually a big backlog of the online orders due to the massive spike of the online orders resulted out of the COVID. So the measures we've taken are actually the extension of our last mile capabilities and the ramp up of our fulfillment capacity as well. So we have transformed some spaces in our stores, as I mentioned earlier, into dark stores in order to cater for this increase of the online. And we have actually now dedicated stock for the online in what we call the dark stores. So ramping up of the fulfillment capacity and the capabilities as well, and extending the reach by signing with more last mile providers, reputable last mile providers. And as I mentioned earlier, we have actually tied up with some reputable last mile providers in the region. We have coordinated that through the government, so we're getting actually the government support as well in cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi to use the local taxi companies in order for us actually to increase the capacity of our last mile. So the key word for me is Chanel, the holistic approach. If you want to look at the ramping up the online capacity, you have to look at it from different angles. You have to make sure that you have available stock in place dedicated for online. You have to make sure that you have the available resources in order to do the pick, pack, cleaning, and preparation of products. You have to look at automation as well, and this I reiterate on the importance of it because we have some limitations when it comes to number of orders per store, right? The solution for that will be the automation. And just to comment on Kunal's point, which is very much important, automation does not mean laying off people. Automation, it means ramping up capacity and redeployment of resources across the different departments and aspects you have. So it's all about having the right stock. It's all about having the right resources available in place. It's all about having the right fulfillment capacity and capabilities. And this, of course, should be complemented by having the right partner when it comes to last mile and delivery.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mohammed. And now coming back to Kunal, Kunal, one last question. We are almost running out of time, So managing and meeting customer expectations in times of unprecedented, online demand. What do you do? How do you manage it?
I think, Shailen, again, the question is, first we have to understand the expectations, right? So I think during these times, customer expectations have also changed. I mean, so it's linked with the consumer behavior. I mean, with the whole new behavior and the whole expectation. I mean, I think all of us would agree, at least here in UAE, that now the lead time for online grocery, which used to be within 24 hours or maybe within maximum 1 day or 2 days, had gone up to say a week. So 7 days. So is the consumer expecting now a grocery to come within 7 days, and is he happy? I would say yes. So I think within our times there are certain change in the expectations also in the consumer, and so the rules remain same in terms of meeting those requirements. I would still say the focus remains on keeping the customer informed is a very important bit, because everybody gets a little worried about whether the order is gone, whether I'll get uh, a huge part of it is to do with fulfillment. I mean, I am personally also a user, right? So you've ordered 20 products, but you're not sure if after a week you'll get 10 out of it or 12 out of it. So I would say to also keep the customer informed and have a very clear channel of communication. I think with Simon also mentioned, these guys have already succeeded and been there, done that. But in this part of the world, because people who are just starting, I mean, I'll take our own example from Bateel perspective. We were ready. We could do everything in terms of packing the boxes, putting it out on couriers, giving it out to the drivers. The fact where we actually struggled was a customer service. So customer service teams fortunately also reports into me, and I could see the guys were struggling to answer, whether it's phone calls, it's WhatsApp, it's emails, it's can I get my order, when will I get my order. I mean, these are basic things. I think keeping a customer informed is pretty much the key to the whole thing. I don't think people expect that you order and you get delivered after 2 hours within these times, but at least they expect that, okay, if you're giving it after a week also, tell me what time of the day, what slot of the day. That will really help. So I think ultimately the bottom line is we need to invest in technology, and we need to have some relook at the processes on how we carry out these customer service related activities, because in a short term or for a lower volume, you can manage with like I said, a quick solution. But just about when you want to ramp up for a bigger volume, I think unless you have strong processes and some automation behind it, it becomes extremely difficult to manage the customer expectations. So ultimately, I think that's pretty much the main thing that I would say helps the meeting the customer requirements really.
Thank you, Kunal. I think that was a great, and almost we are at the end of our session. And I would request the organizers to launch the poll for the audience, and we all can make some closing remarks if anybody wants to make a closing remark. Maybe Simon, can you talk about any innovations that people are doing now in the Europe, UK?
Yes, I
Any
think
innovations are happening in the last mile delivery?
well, I think my first comment would be actually for all businesses is take the positives out of what has happened over the last few months. I think a number of us mentioned already, but we've seen business being able to react. We've made decisions. We've changed things really quickly, much faster than we've done before. So I think there's some positives there. But then secondly, I think it's really important to get really close to your customers, to listen to them, and then review your strategy and just make sure what are the learns from them, because undoubtedly this will change customer behavior in the future. But let's be really clear, there's an important role for shops, there's an important role for online, but I think online and last mile delivery will be even more important going ahead. And I think there'll probably be some key decisions and financial investments perhaps to make in terms of updating or replacing some of your systems, some of the relationships you've got with your last mile carriers, or different fulfillment methods. And probably my final comment might be is, having gone through this, is pay close attention to what the impact is on your P&L. if you're just suddenly shifting sales from your shops to online, unless you're charging a premium for all the shipping and everything else, it can have quite a catastrophic impact. So that might be having new models and deciding, have you got the right assortment? Are you charging the right amount for shipping? I think that will be key to make sure that you grow your business profitably in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to thank all the panelists, and it was really a fruitful discussion. I think to sum up, we need to ramp up our capacities because the online purchasing demand is here to stay, whether it's grocery, whether it's electronics, whether it's apparel, whether it's dates, and we all need to ramp up and rise up to this situation because this demand is not going to go away. This is here to stay. Thank you so much. Over to you, Micah.
Thanks to all of our panelists and Shailen for the insightful session. That is the end of our webinar for today. Thank you all so much for joining. The webinar will be accessible via our website for on-demand viewing once we close the webinar. If you do have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us via our website. We have our next retail and e-commerce webinar next Wednesday, 13th of May at 11 o'clock, where we will discuss building an e-commerce business quickly and efficiently. Once again, thank you for all the attendees and all the speakers, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Great discussion. Yeah, thank you so much.